I'm going to look at the end of Judges and relate it to the craziness that's going on in our world today. Wow, I thought 2020, I thought it was going to be a tense year. I did, because our country has been divided for many years politically. It was an election cycle. Seems like it's never been. Have you ever seen so much division and as loud and as hatred as it is to each side? We're a divided country for sure. So I was expecting to have a crazy year. But whoa! Talk about craziness. Who would have ever predicted that not only would we start off with an impeachment, but then we have a virus, and then it's a virus that causes so much fear that it's like in a movie. It's like in a movie. The whole world shuts down, and then we go from that to having 40 million people out of work, filing for unemployment. And somehow the stock market's doing okay. I'm so confused with this year, and then now we have protests and riots from an incident that happened in Minneapolis, and I tell you, we just have had a crazy year, and looking ahead, going, what I thought was going to be crazy hasn't even happened yet. Could it get even crazier? And the answer is yes. Yeah, life can get pretty crazy. And there's a story in Judges about just how crazy Israel got. And it got crazy. And it's an interesting story because sometimes when our world is crazy, we start to blame certain things. We'll blame the system that we have. We'll blame history and historical figures. We might blame particular groups or people. In Scripture, we see that the major problem when it comes to civil unrest is sin. And the book of Judges shows us how one person's sin spreads. And it spreads, and it's contagious. And it infiltrates other people's lives, it infiltrates communities until you have this ginormous community that is sinning, rebelling against God. Now there's a phrase in the book of Judges. It's used 4 times. Near the end, chapter 17, 18, 19, and chapter 21. It's this expression that says, in those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. In those days, there was no king in Israel. There was no spiritual leader. No one who stood up and said, this is wrong. Don't do this. There was no government leader. There was no force. There was no authority figure that was leading everyone back to God. Instead, everyone used their own value system and said, what do I think? And it caused mass chaos. It's used 4 times, this expression, and each time there's a story right before the expression. And it's kind of telling the story. It's like, here's this story, in those days Israel had no king. Here's this story, it grows, in those days Israel had no king. The next story, Israel had no king. And then the big story, Israel had no king, everyone did what they saw fit, period, ends the book. And so it's this climax to chaos. So I'm going to share all 4 stories today. I think they might be new stories for some of you. And that's always fun when you share a new story. It's not a story, not too many people are turning to the end of Judges to preach on a Sunday morning. And so they might be new stories for you, which might be good and enjoyable. And what I'd like for you to do is just to see how sin spreads, not just in a person's life, but how it spreads into a family, into friendships, into community, into an entire nation. It starts off with just one guy, Micah. Micah had a mother who was very wealthy. She had a ton of silver. And Micah became greedy. He wanted the silver for himself. And so he went and stole his mother's silver. Stealing is wrong. It's wrong. And it's wrong if you even try to justify it. If you go, well, I have a right to steal right now because those people make me so mad. Because they have so much. Stealing is always wrong. But Micah stole from his own mother. And it wasn't conviction. It wasn't the fact later he was like, I shouldn't have done it. He heard his mom cursing the gold. Sending a curse upon it. Lord, curse this gold. I pray that the owner of it. And it is. So she was casting these curses, and that kind of freaked Micah out. And so Micah said, okay. This gold, this silver, it's like switch to gold. It's silver. The silver that you're cursing, I stole it. She said, oh, good. Well, hey, bring it back to me, and I'll give you some of it. So, okay. Yeah, you're going to get this in an inheritance anyways, Micah. Okay. So he goes, retrieves the silver, brings it back to mom. His mom decides to give him the silver, but first she takes it to a store, she has them work on it, and turns some of the silver into a very expensive, precious idol. And she brings that back to her son and says, here you go. He goes, awesome! Thanks, Mom! And he took this silver, this new god that he had been worshiping even before it was an idol, and he takes it and he builds this shrine for it. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. There was no leader coming in saying, no, this is wrong. There was no structure in setting up this idol. He did what was right in his own eyes. And there's a big lesson in it because Micah doesn't ever seem to be sorry for stealing. He's never sorry for it. He justifies it. And he turns what he thought what should be wrong into something that he glorifies and tells others, and he's proud of it. That's what happens to sin in our lives individually. Our personal sin becomes justified sin. If you're going to sin and you're not going to be sorry for it, you end up justifying it. That's what we all do. I was sitting at the table with my father-in-law, and I had one of those containers of roasted peanuts. You know what I'm talking about? It's those kind of peanuts that you cannot eat just one. It's like the only way to stop eating them is to push it away from you. You have to actually reject it, otherwise you'll just eat them all. Are you with me? You know what I'm talking about? So I'm sitting there with him, and I say, hey, you want a peanut? He goes, no, thank you. It's okay. Tell you what, why don't you just have one? And we'll see if you eat more. So he reached over and pulled out one. I put the lid back on, just sat it there. We start talking, we're talking. And then he just turns and looks at me. And he gives me this big grin. I'm like, okay, you got me. He didn't even care. He's like, I need another peanut. And he grabbed it, he opened it up, he starts eating more. That's what sin is like, isn't it? It's like no one can just take that desire within us and just go, okay, that desire is going to be gone. I'm not going to do it anymore. We just have this craving to keep doing it. Why do we gossip? Because it's so annoying and painful? No, because there's something juicy and good about it. Why do we lie? Well, because it protects our pride and our character. It helps us get out of things. It makes us look better than we are. Why do we sin? It's because there's something within us that wants to sin. And we have this craving, and so we'll get into it, we'll start sinning, and we have to make this painful choice. Do I just stop, or do I keep going? Am I going to feel sorry for it and repent and turn and reject it and go, I'm tired of these people? Have you ever done that with like a potato chip bag where you're like, and you just push it away from you, because if you don't, you just keep eating them. You're like, get these away from you. Do you just take sin and just shove it away from you and go, no, I repent. I've got to get rid of it. That's one choice. And the other choice is to justify it. And to convince yourself that what you know is wrong is actually right. To begin to even glorify your own sin. That's the choice that's before every one of us. And that's why we'll sometimes magnify our sin and tell others boastfully about it. It's because the other alternative is to admit that we're weak. There's a desire that we have that's not right. Now that's just the first story, and it starts off a fairly simple story. It's not that destructive. Sin does that. So you stole, and now you're worshiping a false god, but it's contained. It's in Micah's home. But that's not what sin does. Sin spreads. It always does. Personal sin leads to justified sin, and justified sin leads to false teaching. It leads to heresy. Because you can't just go, okay, my sin's okay. You've got to really justify it. You've got to create disciples, and you've got to bring others on to your way of thinking. That's what almost always happens. Have you ever seen someone who's having tremendous relationship problems all of a sudden turn and start giving other people advice on how to fix their relationship problems? They're trying to create disciples. They're like, oh yeah, you know what I did? My boyfriend, he did this and this and this, so I went and I burned all this stuff. I just put a big set on fire. Yeah, so what you ought to do right now is you ought to go burn all of his stuff. You start giving advice to someone else, and you start trying to create more disciples to do crazy things, because that's what we do. We're trying to justify how we behaved. And the best way to justify it is to get others aboard. And that's what happens to Micah. A traveler comes by, a Levite. He comes by and Micah says, hey, stay, eat, how you doing? They start talking. He starts learning that the Levite's a priest. And Micah goes, you know what? I've got a God right here. You want to see it? He said, you got a God? Oh yeah, come here, I want to show you something. He takes him in the back room and shows him this very expensive silver idol. Look at this. Where'd you get this? Well, I stole it. but my mom ended up cursing it, and so she turned it into an idol for me. I said, really? Okay. He said, no, don't leave. You have to stay. I need a priest. I'm going to have my own God. I need someone who's going to offer my sacrifices to my God for me. The priest says, yeah, no thanks. He said, no, wait, hang on, don't leave yet. I'll make it worth your while. Free room and board. I'll pay for all your meals. You just stay with me for a year. The Levite's like, that's not a bad deal. I'm just your priest, and that's it. That's it. Like, deal! Woohoo! In those days, Israel had no king. And you start seeing how this individual sin is spreading now. And it's infecting others. It began with just one person who began to justify their sin, and then they justified it so much that they start to have recruits. You have to believe what I believe, and you have to think this way too. How else are you going to justify your sin? How are you going to go through this world unless you have others that will justify your sin with you? You got to surround yourself with people that think like you. You got to surround yourself with people that you can convert and go, no, what they said is wrong is actually right, and what is right is actually wrong, and I want to live this way, so come with me. It'll be good for you. It begins to spread and begins to warp other people, and I tell you, I've seen this so many times. Have you ever seen two people that should never be friends become friends? It's like, oh no, they became friends? Oh no! And it's like someone who's like devious and someone who's ears are too open. And it's destructive. You just watch it as it grows and spreads and causes destruction to all the relationships and everyone they go. I've seen it in the church. I've seen it in families. Create disciples. Because we want to convince others that we are okay. And we're doing what's right. The third story gets even crazier now as 5 men from Dan come. Dan is one of the tribes of Israel, and these 5 men come up, and Micah's gone, but the priest is there. So they start talking to the priest, and they said, "So, what are you doing here? What's going on?" He said, "I'm a priest. I serve this one God that's here." He said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Let me show you." He went and showed him Micah's mother's silver. It's a beautiful idol. These 5 men start talking, and they're like, "Man, this isn't a good deal for you. Do you know what would be better than this? If you took the silver, took the idol, and came with us." You see, we've got a whole group. And we've got a whole tribe. We've got like a little village going on here. If you came and you were our priest with such an idol like this, wow, you would hit the jackpot. Imagine instead of just serving one person, imagine serving a whole village. You have fruit with your meals? How well are you eating? And what started off with Micah's greed has grown to a priestly greed. It's passed over. It's a true disciple now who's going to follow this greed to the very end. Heresy always leads to community sin. It leads to several people, many people, believing a lie. So they grab the idol. The priest goes, "This is awesome. I just keep moving up in the world. This is a promotion." They take the silver, they take the idol, they all travel up and get with their clan, and they keep going. Micah comes home, and he's like, "Oh no, where's all my stuff?" He takes off and he finds this priest, and he comes over and he goes, "What are you doing?" He said, "What's your problem?" He said, "What do you mean, what's my problem? You took everything. You took all my silver. You took my God. You took my priest. You've left me with nothing." He said, "You better quit talking like that. I want you to look around right now how large we are. We're bigger than you. You shut up and you go back home." Micah looked around, and the shut up is the actual Hebrew text there too. Micah looked around, he's like, oh, he realized he was truly outnumbered. So Micah turned around and went home. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. And you see this entire community now that's worshiping a false god. Where did it come from? How did Dan, this tribe of Israel, start worshiping a god other than Jehovah? Other than the God that saved him from Egypt? Where did this come from? It's one guy. One man's sin who started to justify it so much and create disciples and it started this heresy, this false teaching that spread, and now it's infected an entire community that's worshiping this God of greed, of cursed silver, of brute force. And you see how the sin just spreads throughout Israel. I read a really interesting book called In His Steps. Has anyone ever read that old book? Hey, it's a great book. It's a book I think everyone should read. It's an inspiring book about a homeless man who came to a church and didn't receive any help. And so he came the next week, he came up front, scolded the church for not helping him, and fell down and died. So that's chapter 1. And it convicted the whole church. The pastor went home and was like, what am I doing? Oh no. And everyone's like, went home and they repented. So the next Sunday the pastor came and he said, you know what? I'm ready to make a radical promise. Anyone here who would like to commit themselves to not making any more decisions unless Jesus would make the decision. It's what would Jesus do? That's where they get the bracelet idea. It's from the book, In His Steps. Okay? What would Jesus do? We'll ask ourselves that question before we do anything. And so this group in the church, they made this decision together. They came in the back, they met the pastor, they all made this commitment. And it was people who owned newspapers and people who were very talented singers and all these people made this commitment. We're going to do this. And then you just keep reading the book and you see revival break out. And it's like, oh, and how would this affect how this happened? And how would this affect how this happened? And then when people make individual decisions, it's amazing the ripple effect. In Judges, it's the opposite ripple effect. It shows us how you can destroy a society by starting with unrepentant sin. And now you have this entire community that's caught up in it. How do you change an entire community? The fourth story is absolutely the worst, and perhaps the worst history that you can read of Israel's existence. The Benjaminites. It's the story of how the Benjaminites were destroyed and how they were given wives. The story starts off now. Now you have this corrupt country that's worshiping false gods, and a country with no king and leadership and no one pointing people to God. And there's a man who had a concubine, and his concubine had left him and had been unfaithful, and he went to get his concubine back. It took him a lot of convincing. He stayed there several days trying to convince her to come back with him, and finally she agreed, and the father agreed, and he brought his concubine back, and they spent the night at someone's house, and while they were there, some thugs living in Benjamin came and pounded on the door. We want that man! We know there's a man in there! Bring him out! Throw him out here! We want to have sex with him! Bring him out! They're like, no, we're not going to do this. He said, we want him! They're like, okay, hey. What if I give you my concubine? I'll give her to you. I'll save my own neck. After all this convincing her to come with him, he now grabs her and throws her outside. And he lets these thugs rape her and abuse her all night long. The next morning, he came outside and found his concubine dead. Picked her up and he went home. He was upset. I don't know if any of the anger was towards himself, giving her up to the men. But he was angry. And he wanted justice. I want justice for what has happened. And so I'm going to get it. And so he butchered her up. Cut her up into 12 pieces. And he sent her body parts all through Israel. And he rallied everyone. He got everyone angry with it. And injustice has happened. We have to get justice, and we have to have it now. All of Israel showed up, this giant army. An army with no leader. Yikes! Do you know what that causes? Chaos and rioting. An army that wants justice now, and it's like something has happened, an innocent person has died. What are we going to do? It's like, I know what to do. Let's go kill the Benjaminites. Let's go get them. They went to Benjamin. The situation continued to escalate. Benjamin wouldn't hand the men over. And so they went to war. They fought. They fought another battle and another battle until finally Israel won. They slaughtered the Benjaminites. They killed all their women, all their children. They burned their houses and leave thousands of men dead on the streets. And then they make a vow. We will never give you one of our wives if this is how you treat women. And then they just all went home. And And there's the Benjaminites now, homeless, with no wives and no future, no homes. And they realized, we're about ready to lose a tribe. The Benjaminites came in and said, what are we going to do? And people started going, yeah, we were probably overly harsh there. we might have overreacted. But what do we do now? We've gotten to this point. And so they scratched their heads and they said, well, we made a promise to God that we wouldn't give you any of our wives, so we'll get you wives from somewhere else. So they raided villages. They killed men and women. And they took little girls that had never been with men. And they came and they gave them to the Benjaminites. And still they needed more. They found a village that was ripe, had a lot of young girls that would be great to steal. So they waited at night until they had a special dance, and all the Benjaminites just came running out of the darkness, grabbing their wife, like a caveman, dragging them off into the dark. That's the story. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. It's this horrible, horrible story. And I look at it, how did they get to that point? How did Israel get to a point where they're raiding villages and killing people? It's very simple. Sin spreads and it gets ugly. It gets so ugly. What we do as a people is we get caught up in it, and we forget what the issues really are. And when there's chaos around us, we're like, well, where did all this come from? It's like, well, it comes from unrepentant sin that spreads. It's the way people are thinking. It's not the way God's thinking. And we need leadership, spiritual leadership. We need someone to stand up and to say what's wrong is wrong. What's right is right. And it doesn't matter. You don't want to go and follow your own heart and what makes sense to you. You want to look to the Lord and go, Lord, where should we go? What should we do? And let God be our leader. And let Him be our God. If we all want revival in our country, it always starts at home. It starts with people, individuals. We can't expect an entire nation to repent from sin unless I repent from sin. I can't expect others to pray and turn to God unless I pray and turn to God. Because just as it spreads in an ugly way, it also spreads in a good way. So let each one of us look into our own hearts and ask ourselves, where am I with God? Have I repented of my sin? Because when it gets to community sin always leads to civil unrest. Let's pray. Lord, I just thank you so much for the opportunity we have to come and to worship you, to hear your word. Lord, you are a good and gracious God, and I just thank you for the love that you have in our life. And Lord, I pray that you would inspire us to truly just live for you. We love you, Lord. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.